Hello, everyone. This session's a bit different. I seem to have lost the recording slash the recording started and didn't fully join the meeting, I think. But not to fret, I was able to record most of what Jeffrey said, so I'll also do the intro of that in the share out. But I'll just go ahead and record everything that we talked about in the session, and yeah, I'll try and touch on the questions that people were asking in the chat as well. So, yes, welcome again to this session on summer learning and administration. Yeah, kind of a mishmash of a bunch of different topics, both anything from, how can you promote summer reading and practice of languages and math and all that. And then also how can you use Flint for administrative purposes? So placement testing and admissions specifically was what I was looking at here, but it is a really broad topic. There's a lot that you can do here. So if you have any questions about this further that you want to ask, feel free to reach out to me, or you can also ask them in our community, which there is a QR code for at the end of this session. Yeah, so I'll start off by covering some icebreaking news, and then we'll go into summer learning, the sorts of activities that can be used there, and then administration, and then at the end, I'll attach what I have of the video of Jeffrey giving his share out about all of the cool things that he's doing with Flint in terms of placement and otherwise. But yeah, so the recording is here. Apologies again for the weirdness of it. And yeah, typically questions are welcome during our sessions at any point. But for the icebreaking news, what I shared this week was this article from the Nature publication. And basically, it was a meta-analysis of the effect of ChatGPT on students' learning performance, perception, and higher order thinking. They evaluated and kind of summarized the findings from a bunch of different articles and research studies, and came up with 5 suggestions that I thought were very interesting and exciting to see, because I see a lot of Flint schools already using these sorts of policies as they are integrating AI into their teaching and learning. So yeah, the first one of which is, when you're setting up different sorts of activities, you definitely want to have learning scaffolds or use educational frameworks. So like Bloom's taxonomy, yeah, those should be provided to AI. We already try and build this into Flint, and I see teachers emphasizing it even more also when they're creating activities. So that's really cool. It's also recommending broad use of AI across various grade levels and different types of courses, really trying to support diverse learning needs across different sorts of contexts. And then third of which is integrating AI into different learning modes. So, the one that they highlighted was problem-based learning, but yeah, how can AI help with, creative writing, and how can AI help with recall and all of that? Yeah, that's one of the suggestions from the study. And then the fourth one was interesting. So it said continuous use of ChatGPT or whatever AI that you're using should be ensured to support student learning, because after 4 to 8 weeks, that's when you get more stable effects of the use of AI. I'm assuming this is when, students are engaging with it not just because it's something new, and they're actually learning how to interact with it and how to use it for their own learning. And then finally here, it says that AI or ChatGPT should be flexibly integrated into teaching, as an intelligent tutor, as a learning partner, as an educational tool. And yeah, these are all things that I see schools that work with us already doing. So it's really cool to see that validated. But yeah, so I'll jump into the summer learning aspect of things. So what sorts of activities can be used to promote summer learning? Yeah, if you're not yet familiar with Flint, we have kind of two sides of our platform. There's the chats in Flint, which is basically like ChatGPT, but with additional educational scaffolding, and the data is secure and protected. Um, and then we also have activities, which is like you're building your own bot. It's definitely more prescribed, and you as a teacher can give Flint a persona or a goal or extra context on your classroom and your students' learning, and then students can have conversations with that activity that you've made. And it kind of acts like a little teaching assistant that can go and have all of these conversations with your students and record all of that thought process and the sorts of conversations that it's having. So all that to say, in this session, I mostly just cover activities because the chats are a bit more self-explanatory, and I think then we would have way too much to cover. So yeah, so mostly focusing on activities here, but there's definitely a lot that you can do in terms of summer learning with chats and also with placement. I'll touch on it a little bit, but I won't show any examples here. Yeah, so for the summer, Flint can be a really good async teaching assistant. And yeah, that's kind of what AI is built to enable. So, so you can think about how Flint can help facilitate additional practice in problem solving, language practice, writing practice, how it can provide differentiated practice. I'll kind of show some more specific examples about this. How you can make sure that students' different reading levels are accommodated for, or what skills that they need to develop are emphasized. Yeah, and then of course AI is good at breaking down complex problems, giving immediate feedback, and also summarizing areas of improvement for further practice. So yeah, I'll show you how all of that looks in a bit, but yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that, or things that you can consider for that. These are 3 examples of prompts that you can put into Flint to create activities. Some things to note here are that I really wanted to make sure to include the context about the students. So saying like, hey, these are incoming 10th grade students, or, help students prep during the summer before they enroll in AP Spanish, actual intermediate, incoming 6th grade students. And then that is good for setting up how Flint should interact with the students and what sorts of expectations it should have. And then I always suggest also adding context when you can and content. So for this first one, The Hate You Give is a pretty popular book, but I wanted to upload a chapter by chapter synopsis of the book. And then this one has like the vocabulary list that I wanted to cover with students. And this one is the summer math packet that the students are actually doing so that it knows what questions the students are trying to answer. I hyperlink them here. You can't hyperlink them in Flint, just by the way, but yeah, you can download it or copy it and paste it into Flint. Yeah, so with these, I gave the really quick example demo of an activity. So here, when you're creating an activity, you can just scroll down here. I went ahead and made a custom activity. And then I pasted in this prompt. It's the one about acting as a reading guide for The Hate You Give. I'm going to attach the chapter by chapter synopsis here, which I just grabbed from SparkNotes. But of course, if you have your own with your own analyses, even better. Yeah, and then I'm going to send that to Flint. And in this chat, we can create the activity together. So here it's saying, I'll help you create a reading guide activity with the reflection prompts. So now it's reading the chapters summaries so it can create questions for students. And then, yeah. So creating the reading guide for students. And of course, like if you want to edit it in any way you can, it seems like here it misunderstood me a little bit, saying that it will create the reflection prompts, but I'll just correct it later, saying that the students will give it the reflections. Or actually, the reflection prompts might be good. Yeah, this is cool. Um, yeah, just like questions, reading questions for students to analyze with Flint. Yeah, actually, I really like this. So we can keep this. And then, yeah, as it'll like spit out what it uh, has created for me. And then on the right side here, I can simulate the session or I can start it manually. So I always recommend that you do both just to check the behavior of the AI. Here, if I click simulate, it will pretend to both be itself and the student and give you a mock conversation of what this activity might look like. So then it's like really easy for you to, you know, get an idea of what this might play out to look like and what sorts of maybe changes you might want to make. Yeah, and then always you could try it out manually. I would pretend to be a student who's like kind of struggling or a student who's disengaged and see how Flint supports students at different levels there. Yeah, and then of course from the preview, there might be changes that you want to make to the activity. So you can type them in here. I'll just like add something via speaking. So I'll just say, hey, this is a summer reading activity for students. You know, they're on summer break. They're not exactly wanting to think about school. So can you be like funny and tell jokes and use other methods of engagement to make it a fun exercise for students? Maybe you can like role play different characters in the book or yeah, I don't know, other ways of engaging them. Not the most coherent message, but Flint can parse through that and make changes for me. So now it's saying that, you know, it'll update it with a more lighthearted approach with humor and interactive elements to keep students motivated during their break. Yeah. So that's what that looks like. Um, at this point, someone during the session asked what happens next here, how you share it out. So once it finishes making those updates, and of course I would like preview it again and check if it responded well to my feedback. But once you're happy with the activity, you can click create activity and the sharing box will pop up immediately. You can of course add this to a group. Like I could add this to a group if I know that my students are already in it, but you know, it's the summer, they might not have the group set up yet or anymore. So the most direct way to share it with your students is copying the link and sharing it with them. And then they can log in with their school email and access the activity. Yeah. Oh, you do also have the option of adding specific students if you want. So if there's like specific students who you know would want to use this, or like if you're creating a different kind of activity that's supporting students who need to practice a specific skill, you could also add their emails here and then notify them via email that you've shared something with them. Cool. Yeah, okay. So and then Derek said that he's new to Flint as of last month, and he knows that teachers can see all the interactions within an activity. So like any students that access this activity, because I'm the one who created it, I can see all of their sessions with it. But he asked if teachers can see the free chats that students might do over the summer. So the ones where they're just chatting with Flint uh, more dynamically. If you click here, you can see what the student prompts are. Yeah, and the answer to that is that teachers can't, but administrators can. So if there's any like concerns or anything, definitely reach out to your administrator. Uh, yeah, Flint already acts more strictly with students than it does with teachers. So it knows that it knows who's a student and well, if your workspace is set up correctly, it knows who's a student and how to act more as like a guide for those students rather than a you know, helpful teaching assistant. Uh, and also any concerning messages that students might send will get flagged And those are all visible to the administrator as well in their dashboard. And yeah, they'll be able to see any of those also and reach out to the students and manage that. Yeah. Um, okay, cool. So the next part that I showed is how to use Flint for differentiating support. So, how to set up, or yeah, it's really good at this. So you can set up different activities for different students. You can scale an activity difficulty really easily. And I'll show you how to do this by duplicating or I'll show you how to do something similar by duplicating and requesting changes. Yeah, you can instruct Flint to ask more challenging questions as students demonstrate understanding or make follow-up activities for specific students who seem to be struggling. And the image here is kind of like me trying to show you like the range of different activities that you might make for language practice, right? So maybe student A really needs help with like vocabulary and sentence structure, but then student B and C need help with speaking and listening. So you could create a variety of activities and edit them so that the students will get the customized help based on what they need. So let me find my example of that. Okay, so this was the second prompt that I shared with you all, the preparation for AP Spanish with specific vocabulary. And so this is like a vocabulary practice activity, right? But I could take this activity and duplicate it. I'll just duplicate it in home, but if you have a group, of course, you can move it into there. And then in here, I can go into the duplicates activity settings, and then I can say something like, restructure this activity to help students practice speaking skills and make it speaking input only. So yeah, this is me changing this activity to be a spoken activity. And then now the emphasis is more on students speaking. But I could also say like, hey, restructure this activity to practice listening and make it audio output only. And I could say like, yeah, anything else and build off of that first activity that I built and just create duplicates and edit it. So now I have like a wide variety of types of activities. So yeah, now it's creating it into a oral practice activity. And of course I would like preview this and then you can update this one. And now you have the oral one and also the vocabulary one. And then here you can share specific links with specific students and really give them that sort of targeted and differentiated practice based on what their needs are. Yeah. And then, cool, okay, there were no questions about this part. So yeah, so then the next thing I talked about was tips for activity creation. So I would always say, upload content when possible that helps with Flint understanding the context of the students' learning, what level they're at, what sort of expectations you have of them, and how in depth you want to cover certain topics. And then I would say be specific in how you want Flint to be helpful to students. It defaults to very helpful, so just keep that in mind. You'll probably need to spend some time prompting it if you want it to act in a very specific way. And usually what I do here is I just tell it, I just like reel in the helpfulness all the way. I say like, don't be helpful at all or something like that. And then based on what I see there with how it's like interacting in the preview, then I can give it a bit more allowances like, oh, actually help with this or help with this. But yeah, there's different ways to adjust the helpfulness that I've covered in other sessions. Like for example, you can ask Flint in the chat, I'm trying to understand where you'll be helpful with students. Can you give me a list of like what you would help students on? And then it can give you this list and then you can like say, okay, actually ignore like number 3 and 4 or something like that. But yeah, and then the final step here is test within and outside the preview. Yeah, I kind of touched on that a couple times already, but I would just say like it can behave a little bit differently within the preview and outside the preview. So just use those both as different testing opportunities there. Yeah. And then concerning tip 1 and 2, Dennis asked, what if you have students in class who are significantly different lifestyle levels? Do you need to make separate activities for those students, or can Flint adjust? Um, yeah, so I told him it kind of just depends on how he wants to do it. Um, my recommendation would be if you have students at like vastly different levels, and maybe students that like can't advocate for their own levels, then you might want to make different activities and administer those to them. But Flint is very good at adjusting to students' levels, either implicitly by like just how the conversation is going. You can tell Flint like, hey, if students are struggling, give them a bit more assistance. If students are doing really well, challenge them with harder questions. Um, but yeah, you can do exactly basically what Dennis said here, where it's like, um, asking Flint to adjust based on student performance. And then one idea that he said after this was like, maybe we can, put in radio buttons or options for students to simply adjust the level of reading really quickly. Yeah, and then I said like you can ask Flint to, in the initial message, ask students what level they want their reading to be at, easy, middle, or hard, or difficult. Um, and then the students can start off by saying like, hey, this is like, I want it to be like middle, or I want it to be hard, or even if the students know it, they can also like tell Flint their Lexile level, and Flint can adjust to that. So yeah, a couple different options there for making it adjusted to the student's level. Um, but yeah, that was a really good question. And then, so on the screen here, or on the slide here, on the right-hand side here is a uh, activity from the public library in Flint. So let me just show you also what that is really quickly. So if I go back to home, down here, there's this public library. Your school might also have a school library, but if you're getting started or just getting started, you might not have anything in there yet. But the public library is a library of activities that have been published willingly by teachers across the world who are using Flint. And in here, you can search based on different like subjects or keywords. But yeah, it's a great place to go in and look for inspiration or things to just use out of the box. And anything that you see in here that you like, you can click on it, you can duplicate the activity to your own workspace, and you can edit that duplicate and make it your own, or even just use it directly if you really like it. But yeah, you can edit and duplicate activities from the library. Okay, and then cool. So then I covered the next section, the administration section. So how to create activities that help with admissions and placement. And yeah, in the admissions and placement process, like I grouped this together with the summer stuff just because like a lot of this is happening in the summer, but I think there are some also common themes of like, how do we evaluate students? How do we meet them at their level, or even just like determine what their level is? So yeah, I would just say like some things to consider when you're exploring options for how Flint can help in your admissions and placement process is asking yourself like, how could AI help with information that is currently hard to get, with decreasing student anxiety around this kind of stuff, with more holistically evaluating students, or even like tapping into the student's full thought process. So there's a lot of different things that you could do here, like, and I'll like touch on some uh, examples in a second, but I think really taking a second to like think about what your goals are and like where you have gaps in your process that AI can help with, that can really, that's from what I've seen, has really shown schools what they can do more with Flint. But yeah, so specific ideas for admissions and placement. Flint can of course help to generate or brainstorm suitable interview/test questions for the various like interviews and assessments that you might give students. I would actually use chats for that. You can, as an administrator, go in, have a chat with Flint, give it like the context of like what sorts of things that you want, and just kind of use it like ChatGPT. But you know, all the information is siloed and protected. But yeah, you can also, you know, create an activity that pretends to be an interviewer for the student or the parent. And then you can have it host like a preliminary interview. And then you can then like have in-person interviews that build on top of that so that your in-person conversations are go much deeper and more specific. So that could be something if you want your interviews to like be more specific and get more information out of them. Yeah, if your goal is to, you know, have more adaptive assessment, you can also have Flint do that for students. So like have it adaptively assess students based on custom criteria. That's where I would say like outlining what your goals are and like uploading any rubrics or criteria that you have can be really helpful. And then of course you can also train Flint activities to take on your school's mission and vision and like your goals and what you're looking for in a student. So it can be really customized and helpful in that way. Yeah, so let me show you some examples of what that looks like. Yes, okay, so this is a mock school admissions interview activity where I told Flint to host a mock school admissions interview for a rising ninth grade student. So giving that context again, ask them questions like one's attached to this list. The list has, you know, personal questions, current school experience questions, academic and extracurricular questions. Yeah, you could just like attach the questions that you already asked. And then I said like adaptively assess them, which I know is kind of broad. So I said making your questions more specific and targeted as you go. Of course, if you wanted to like be adaptive in a different way, you can customize it there. And then I also gave it the context of our school values, curiosity, kindness, and courage. So look for those traits. And then I said only let students input audio so that it is actually like they're talking to a interviewer and they have to like give their spoken response. And also the perk there is when the students speak their response, you can go back through the transcript and play their spoken voice. So that way you can like listen to like the confidence in their speaking or like the excitement in their speaking that the little transcription won't show exactly. But yeah, then Flint was able to create this for me. And of course I would try it out, make additional changes. But something like that could be used as a preliminary interview or as a mock interview if you're wanting to let students practice to help decrease their anxiety for the real thing. Yeah, and then I have two examples for placement testing. So for this one, I said I uploaded this quiz that just has like these sorts of like complete the sentence English placement evaluation stuff. And then I just said, okay, administer this placement test as if you were test proctored. Do not give students the answers. Summarize their answers at the end in the form of a list. And so, yeah, when we simulate this one, you can see that it just gives students the set questions from the upload one by one. Once it loads, there we go. And then students can like answer A, B, C, D, or ABC, I guess in this case. And yeah, so that's like what that activity kind of looks like. I would just be careful here. Earlier when I was simulating it, it kind of broke because there's too many questions. But yeah, you can definitely try it out manually and simulate the first part. But yeah, so here I would just say like, yeah, that's like not much different from the student's current experience maybe. But there is like the sort of scaffolded system if they have like questions or you could also add more to this where it's like evaluate students more on specific topics that they missed, or you could have it automatically grade it and like give them a response too if that's what you want. So yeah, and I know Jeffrey talks about that later in his placement testing, so I won't dive too deeply into that. Yeah, but at this point, Dennis asked, can we easily set up assessment interactions so that students can skip a question or answer it later in this assessment, or perhaps allow students to review all their answers before submitting their work? And yes to all of those. I think actually, not this time, but the last time when I tested this activity, it actually automatically included in that initial message that students can come back to questions later if they want to. So yeah, you can definitely ask it to do that in here, and Flint will apply that to the experience. Yeah, and then that's also why I asked Flint to summarize what their answers were at the end. And then you could actually give it that one extra step of saying like, hey, like have students review their answers and then grade them at the very end. So you can also make that a part of the experience for sure. Yeah, cool. And then the next example here was, let me actually go back to my activities. Here it is. Okay. So here's an example of an oral placement test that I did. And what I uploaded here was actually this document where it has like different speaking prompts for different grade levels. But of course, you could do this for different languages or, yeah, like have Flint ask questions for different levels of a specific language. Yeah, and then I think that's like that was something that a lot of the registrants were really interested in, how to do placement exams for different languages, because of course I'm sure that takes up a lot of time for teachers over the summer. So if you can have the students have those sorts of conversations within Flint and then have Flint evaluate them and what sort of level they're at, then yeah, that's definitely something that you could create in Flint instead. So yeah, that's like the example there. Um, yeah. And then someone had asked about this was like, can Flint read aloud to the student? So actually, I think in this activity, the way that we ended up doing it was I asked Flint to only output audio and then only let students input audio. So here, like students would listen to Flint's message and then they will record their response. And then again, here you can listen to the students' voice snippets later on as, yeah, when you're reviewing their back and forth. But yeah, so yes, you can make it a completely speaking based one. You can make it reading based. You can make it a mix. Uh, various different placement test options there. Yeah. And then Dennis said, great, like this sort of practice reduces student anxiety. And then someone asked, for language practice, Flint has been giving feedback in a target language, Chinese in her case, or their case, sorry. And students understand better if the feedback were in English, especially grammar feedback, but they were struggling with getting Flint to give feedback in English. And so here, I would say that the key there is to make sure that the grading rubric actually is in English. From what I've seen, that's what can help um, make sure that that is happening. So let me find an example here. Yeah, so this one has a grading rubric. And this grading rubric is actually in English. And it is also like a pretty basic activity. So a lot of the feedback is in English and a lot of the conversation is also in English. But I think if you tell Flint, give your feedback in English and make your grading rubric in English, then these final session analytics that are shown to the students in terms of strengths, areas of improvement, and a follow-up activity will be in English. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you're still struggling with that. I can also play around with it a bit. Yeah, and then someone asked, can Flint assess music? Not artfulness, but accuracy of note playing or singing. It's a good question. It's a good question, and I wish Flint could, but yeah, Flint is still just based off of a large language model. So we're not quite there yet with AI, but I've seen some teachers incorporate music in other ways because you can upload audio files into Flint and like have them play for the students. So students could like, reflect on musical pieces that Flint plays for them. But if they record music for Flint to listen to, it's not really good at determining accuracy there. Yeah. Okay. So, all of this said, the admissions and placement, um, prospective students and families might not be in your current workspace, simply because they don't have emails for your school yet that have your school domain email, and you might not want to add all of them into your uh, like school workspace. So I'm going to show you how to create a new workspace that's open to these groups of people. And yeah, just so you know, our team is happy for you to create additional workspaces in Flint. I will just say that if you do, there is technically a limit of 80 seats for each free workspace, but if that's a problem, feel free to just reach out to our team and we can probably work something out there. But yeah, so if you're in Flint, if you click in the top left here on your school name, here it'll show you all your workspaces. I have like a crazy amount. I'm sure you guys don't have this many, but you could create a new workspace here. And then in these settings, you could say something like school A, parents, and new students or something. Or you can just like say like admissions to school A or whatever it may be. You can name the workspace whatever you want. You could add a URL, a logo, your own school color. There's some additional settings here that you won't see because I'm a super admin and I can create workspaces. But yeah, you can add all of the different settings here to create a new workspace that's branded for your school. And then when you've created this new workspace, yeah, you can copy the link and share it directly with people because the visibility is unlisted. And so this means that anyone who gets that link that you've created can join with whatever email it is that they want to join with. And yeah, you could also, of course, set this to being private and then you can invite people directly via their emails. But yeah, sometimes it might just be easier to just share the link and then they'll have access to that workspace. So just make sure that any of the placement and admissions activities that you're making are in this workspace and not your other school workspace. Yeah, because it's a bit hard to move them in between, just so you know. You could create the tests and stuff as publicly accessible templates, but yeah, or you can ask Flint to generate a summary of the settings and then move it into a new activity in this one. But it's probably just easier to off the bat create the activities from the new workspace. Yeah, okay. So I think that was all that I had. Because after that we did the share out with Jeffrey and that was really amazing. Hopefully I captured most of what he said. I'll put in what I did get. But essentially the context here is that Jeffrey works at Stony Brook School in Long Island. So yeah, usually every year they do like a ton of placement testing, hundreds of hours, I think he said. And that all happens over the summer. So what they decided to do this year is completely move their placement testing into Flint. And they created these sorts of activities where the students will go through the placement test. I'm sure, I think I captured some parts of like what he was saying there, but they'll go through the placement test. At the end, actually, it'll immediately tell the students what sort of class they would fall into, and then that like immediately gives them that feedback. And if there's any like conversations that need to be had with the student or the parents, they can do that afterwards. But yeah, I will clip that part into here, and then I'm sure that the rest of this was also recorded, so I'll add that at the end there. Okay, so it seems that what I did get of the recording was a bit further into Jeffrey's explanation than I thought, but let me just show you all here. So he started off by sharing this template of their math placement test, and on his end he was able to like open up the actual student sessions and kind of show you what that looks like and what sort of feedback that students were giving. And then the part of the recording that I did capture was where he started to explain their process and how they made these. So they like use AI to help generate some of the test questions, and then also how they set it up in here was by uploading a lot of individual questions and graphics.
So that's been super helpful for us. What we did, if you want to see kind of under the hood here, what we actually found to be the most helpful, and if you were interested in doing this yourself, I would strongly recommend this, is actually create your placement test with AI first. So we went to Claude, and we created it for a Latin placement test for languages, which I'll talk about in a second. And we had students, we had Claude just write a Latin placement test for us based on our standards and scope and sequences and stuff. And that was really helpful for us because we found that building it manually was actually a lot easier than building it with Flint. Usually building with Flint is amazing, but for whatever reason for the placement test, we found that having it AI generated in some ways and then proofed by humans and then building it manually really helped streamline that process. And so we put in a whole bunch of things from our placement exams on formative to a document to our scope and sequence. This first document here is our math department scope and sequence from our curriculum guide. And then all of these instructions that I said, this is actually stuff that is written from Claude, like I mentioned, so from AI again. And then we place a timer on it. We do allow it to be translated to other languages. And then we created some grading standards for each class, and that's based on the scope and sequence. So these are like some of our math classes in here. We have also done this with our world languages. So we have, as you can see here, we have an SBS placement workspace. Although don't judge me, but I actually didn't put the world language ones in there by accident. But I'll just show, for example, our French placement exam. We've had a couple students take this already, and it's gone pretty well. But you can see here, here's one student that recently took it. We embedded some clips that our French teacher had put in there, and then it was going through and the student was doing this. And this was really helpful, and this went really fast. It also has some images in there as well. So we found that this saved us a ton of time. It was just as accurate as all of the other online placement tests that we had. And then what's really important for us is at the end, it gives a placement to the family, and it says, you're in Algebra 2, or you're in Pre-Calculus, or you're in Chinese 3, or whatever it might be. And then the family is able to take that and say, okay, great, that sounds like a good fit. Or the family is able to say, hey, I think I actually messed up, or this doesn't reflect where we think our kid belongs. And then they're able to come to us, and then we negotiate that. Maybe we give a different type of test, follow up with the teacher, et cetera. So it's really improved our customer service, to be honest. It's really improved our process. And I can honestly say we've saved already dozens or even hundreds of hours this summer with this. It took a while to make, but then it was really helpful after that. And so we've been really grateful for that. And obviously for our world language ones, we have spoken components that go into it as well, which was super easy to make. The last thing that I'll say, and this is kind of more on the faculty side, but another thing, this is kind of stimulated by an idea that I got from the last Campfire session that I attended. A teacher from Wesleyan was talking about how to create AI lesson plans in a teacher could go through and make an activity that the Wesleyan administration had made, and then they wound up going through and being able to talk about how to integrate AI into their lesson plan. And we took that awesome idea and we kind of extended it to just making syllabi and like unit and lesson plans in general. We've got this big, curriculum guide that binds together our curriculum and our vision and our mission. And so our teachers are going through, and I actually did this morning. We have to have a teacher change for our modern history class. And I went through and asked it to just develop, based on the standards that I put in, a new syllabus for this course because we're making some curricular changes. And it spit out something that is exactly in line with what we do based on the course catalog, based on the content. And it was incredibly helpful. And all I had to do was copy paste part of a version of it, and it made it super fast. Another thing we did is actually trained that based on our school calendar. And so we've actually had teachers going through, we updated the new calendar for 25-26, and we've had teachers simply put in their kind of lesson plan from the last school year, and they say, update this to the new school year based on, when you have holidays, when we have breaks and stuff. And already many of our teachers have saved a ton of time with that. And so that's been super helpful for our office as well, just on the teacher management side. But 5 stars, gold rating from us. We've been super excited to do this. We also have a course registration chatbot with Flint that a lot of our families have used. That's been really helpful from the language side too. And I know Lulu had talked about that a little bit, but what's really nice for us is because we have that chatbot, a lot of students, by the time they get to our placement tests in the admission process, have already used Flint for the course registration chatbot. And so it's not their first time using it, which is really nice. And so that's helpful, even just from the account creation and the data protection side, and it just helps them streamline the process. We've probably had 50 kids take a version of a Flint placement test, and I've heard nothing but positive reviews so far from families for what that's worth. And some families, to be honest, are like ecstatic about it because we're on the cutting edge. We have a lot of imposter syndrome because we're not, we're just trying to save our own time, but it's been super helpful to partner with Flint for this. So thanks for having me. I'd be happy to answer any questions about what we're doing at Stony Brook if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. I think Kay had a question.
Yes. So I was wondering if you upload the images for the geometry or if you let Flint make the images. We have found that Flint struggles sometimes with the images for geometry and especially for chemistry. So I was wondering, do you put in all your own images for that?
We do, yeah. We just make it and kind of screenshot it from existing geometry tests, to be honest. And then what we do is really strictly and like kind of meanly train Flint to say, don't alter this, don't change it, don't reinterpret it, produce it one-to-one from what I've attached here. And that's actually been really important because even when we uploaded it, it was kind of making a different version of a triangle and like AI generating a new triangle that was technically the same question, but it didn't look right. So yeah, training the bot the right way has been really key.
Okay. And then I think everything you just showed is absolutely genius. If there are any questions that I have, would there be a way I could contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just put my email in the chat box if that's okay, and I'd be happy to talk anytime.
Yeah, this is just amazing. Really, really cool stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions for Jeff? I feel like there was so much that you shared. I didn't realize that you guys were already like halfway through the placement testing stuff. I thought you guys were just like trying it out so far this year, but yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, we're aggressive. Making our schedule is like the hardest thing we do, and so we try to get placement stuff as soon as possible. We've actually been doing it since March, so nice. It's been fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Cool. If there are no questions, is there anyone else who wants to share? Also, we have some extra time. If there's any like ideas that you want to, survey the group with. Oh yeah, Dennis is asking Jeff if you're using a AI tool for schedule making or something else.
Oh yeah, great idea. Thanks. Yeah, we actually, for data protection reasons, we used ChatGPT. Is it Enterprise, or we just started that, the one that has like the siloed off data protection. And yeah, it's already saving us a lot of time. We have an online program, an online school, and we just made their entire schedule almost exclusively with ChatGPT, which is really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Okay. Um, if there are no further questions, I will go ahead and wrap up this session. So, yeah, thank you again, Jeff, for coming and sharing with us today. Next week, fingers crossed, we should be launching the next level of our teacher AI literacy course. The first level is already available. I can actually put that link in the chat in case anyone's curious about it. But yeah, so the second level is what we're hoping to launch next week. So if it does launch, that's what the next campfire session will be about. If not, I'm sure I'll find another interesting topic that we can all chat about and brainstorm around. Yeah, and the recording will be posted here later, but as I said earlier, you'll get a email with it. Although right now I'm not sure if it actually recorded, so if it didn't, I will make a new recording with all of the content. But I did capture like 90% of what Jeff said, I think. So yeah, not sure what the software is doing there, but I will double check it. Yeah, and as I mentioned at the beginning, here's a QR code for the campfire sessions. You can subscribe to that calendar and get invites for every new session. And then there's also the code to the community where you can ask additional questions on this topic, other topics, share what you're doing. We're really trying to make it a space for educators to share with each other and learn from each other. But yeah, awesome. That's all I had. Thank you for joining me again today. If you have any questions, I'll stay on for a couple minutes. But yeah, nice to see you all. Stay cool out there.